The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. I have a dream. You've probably heard these famous speeches and many others throughout your life. You've probably wondered, what were these speeches made for? What made them famous? This video will explain all of that, the most famous and consequential speeches throughout American history, in chronological order. The first one is one that almost everyone in America has heard of before, the Gettysburg Address.
77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal.
It was made on November 19th, 1863 at the Soldiers' National Cemetery in Gettysburg. About 28,000 people died at that site, so this was a very solemn moment. Now, on to the speech. It was a really short one, only 271 words, and began with the iconic words, 77 years ago. That opening line refers to the signing of the Declaration of Independence. The speech was basically Lincoln telling the audience that the best way to honor those that had fallen in battle was not through words, but through action instead. It's famous because it signified the turning point in the Civil War. Up till then, the Union, the North, was losing many battles to the Confederacy, and this was kind of where it all turned around. Additionally, the shortness of the speech and its simple, rhythmic opening and rhetoric, 77 years ago, endeared it to many people in America. However, since the speech was in 1863, there aren't any recordings, only a photograph instead. You've probably heard the next one.
Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
This was made by Franklin Delano Roosevelt at his inaugural address. This is in March 1933 and the Great Depression is in full swing. Millions are unemployed and many wait hours on end to get food. Why is it famous? Well, this reassured many Americans that those dark days would eventually come to an end and that you shouldn't be scared for no reason. This next one's also from FDR.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
This speech was made on December 8th, 1941, the day after Pearl Harbor was attacked. This was the speech in which he urged Congress to declare war on Japan. It's famous because the very day before, thousands of Americans were killed by the Japanese Empire, including civilians. This speech bolstered Americans and provided a sense of patriotism in the wake of a great national disaster. This next one was made about 20 years later on September 23rd, 1952 by Richard Nixon.
A man down in Texas heard Pat on the radio mention the fact that our two youngsters would like to have a dog. And believe it or not, the day before we left on this campaign trip, we got a message from the Union Station in Baltimore saying they had a package for us. We went down to get it. You know what it was? It was a little Cocker Spaniel dog in a crate that he'd sent all the way from Texas. Black and white, spotted. And our little girl, Tricia, the 6-year-old, named it Checkers.
This speech really isn't that significant, but it did save Nixon's political career, without which he might have stayed in the Senate, fundamentally changing American history. At this time, there were allegations that he maintained a secret fund that he'd take money from. He didn't. The allegations were made by a disgruntled supporter of a rival, Governor Earl Warren, who would eventually become Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. This speech was basically laying bare all of his financials. He took out loans, he has a mortgage to pay, his family doesn't have anything expensive. But it became famous for saying that he did accept one gift, a dog. To many Americans, this was a great example of a man fighting for his reputation and honor. If you want to learn more about Nixon, you can click on the link above or in the description. This next speech is from the person he'd lost the 1960 election to, John Fitzgerald Kennedy.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
This was JFK's inaugural address, January 20th, 1961. It's at a time when things are going great. The US is fresh off the 50s, American spirit is high, and things are just better off overall. It's famous because it was a kind of call of duty to many Americans. JFK would create his Peace Corps and many Americans volunteered. It was an example of the president advocating to people that they shouldn't use their resources for personal gain, but rather for the greater good. This next one is also made by Kennedy.
We choose to go to the moon.
We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
This was made on September 12th, 1962, and Kennedy was addressing a crowd of mainly college students, and he was talking about the mission to send a man to the moon. It's famous because it's basically telling the crowd that America was going to give it all they've got to win the space race, and that they were going to get a man on the moon by the end of the decade. In July 1969, Neil Armstrong landed on the moon, and JFK's promise was achieved. This next speech is one that almost everyone in America knows. It's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream.
Freedom and justice, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
He made the speech addressing everyone who attended the March on Washington. Back then, segregation was still widespread, and this march tried to end it. Why is it so famous? Well, the famous lines, "I have a dream," resonated with many who attended, and in a 1999 poll of political speech researchers, it was ranked as the #1 speech of the 20th century. This next speech was made by the 40th President of the United States, Ronald Reagan, and you've most likely heard it before.
General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
This speech was delivered on June 12, 1987, and Reagan did it right in front of the Berlin Wall, which separated free West Germany from communist East Germany. It's famous because it was a direct challenge to Soviet leader Gorbachev. If he, Gorbachev, truly moved forward with all of his reforms, then why wouldn't he tear down the Berlin Wall? The last speech here is one that's not so eloquent, but rather one that had profound consequences.
My opponent won't rule out raising taxes, but I will, and the Congress will push me to raise taxes, and I'll say no, and they'll push, and I'll say no, and they'll push again, and I'll say to them, read my lips, no new taxes.
It was delivered in Bush's acceptance speech in the 1988 Republican National Convention. At the time, he was down in the polls by about 6 points. Right after he made this pledge, a Gallup poll found that he was ahead by 9 points, which meant that he had a 15-point gain. However, later on in his presidency, he was forced to raise taxes, thus destroying the public's trust, and many say that the same promise that put him into office took him out. So those are the most famous speeches throughout American history. If you liked the video, then be sure to subscribe and like. If you didn't like the video, then press the dislike button twice, and then, for good measure, press the like button. Thank you for watching Explained. New videos every other Friday.